We said he couldn't possibly miss an open goal today, and to be totally frank, I thought he missed several. Talking about mortgages is obviously fertile territory for Labour. The idea of a Tory mortgage penalty that Keir Starmer referenced time and time again is something we're going to hear a lot about. Of course, it's politically advantageous to them to point at the fact that people are paying more and more every month on their mortgages as interest rates go up. And on the Sunak answer about interest rates being high across the world, that is true to an extent. But actually, when you look at core inflation figures that we had today, significantly higher than any other country in the G7. It's over 7% here. In France, it's about 4%. Germany, it's under 6%. So there is a case that the UK is doing things worse when it comes to the cost of living than other countries. Keir Starmer could have pointed that out, didn't.
I think just to pause you, one of Jeremy Hunt's advisors has described the domestically driven nature of our inflation, which is something that Sunak, for the reasons Stephen Flynn pointed out, but of course Keir Starmer didn't, will be desperate to avoid. Most roads, or many roads, lead to Brexit on this stuff.
What was curious, James, I thought, is what we were saying before. There were so many options for Keir Starmer and you said sometimes that you're right, that's when he struggles most. And rather than linking them all together into a sort of coherent narrative about failure or broken promises or whatever he chose to do, he just asked the same question pretty much 6 times. What is the government going to do to help people struggling with mortgages? Now, Sunak came back and listed a few of the things that the government is doing to help more widely with the cost of living. The truth is, when it comes to mortgages specifically, there's not a lot they are doing. Many in government feel there's not a lot they can do because, of course, if you put money into the economy to help people pay their mortgage bill, they pay their mortgage at the end of the month, you risk driving up inflation even further. So it is a perfect storm for the government. They're really worried. They're really worried about the impact of all this politically. They know people are feeling the pain. They know it's probably going to get worse. And they also feel that actually, in the short term at least, there's nothing they can do about it. So it makes sense for Keir Starmer to try to rub salt into that political wound that is gaping open for the Tories, but doing it 6 times when he could have talked about the Privileges Committee. He could have talked about the inflation figures today.
The best one was the last one. The case study was arguably the most powerful, and he waited until question 3 or 4 to bring James in Selby. I panicked for a bit there when he said, James, I thought, what have I done now? But he that was odd as well. Why would he do that? And Jeremy Corbyn, when he was the future, that was a really effective thing in PMQs. It made Cameron and the Tories look awful when he would stand up and tell a real story about a real person facing real struggle. And the Tories often couldn't really conceal their contempt. So it's a proven track record. It's clearly true. And he brought it in almost as a sort of afterthought.
I suspect what he was trying to do was wait for Rishi Sunak to say it's all fine. This isn't a problem this is a problem everyone else is facing. Here's all the wonderful things we're doing to help. And then say, well, hold on, Prime Minister.
Not helping him.
You may say that, but this is the reality. And actually Sunak's answer to it was a bit wooden. It was a bit robotic. The way you respond to those sorts of heartbreaking case studies, James, is to be very human and say, I appreciate that people are really struggling.
Instead he said, well, don't tell him your plan then, because that really upsets him.
He just turned it back onto Keir Starmer and said, well, you don't have a plan and your plan is dangerous and inflationary. It was a very poor PMQs, I thought, for both leaders, to be honest with you. Rishi Sunak failing to really acknowledge the fact that there is a crisis, that people are really feeling the pinch and that there will be pressure on the government to do more to help those people, even if it's difficult. But Keir Starmer, at the same time, really, I thought, failing to exploit some of the difficulties that the Prime Minister is in. And once again, it was Stephen Flynn who, in a sense, asked the most effective question, drawing those comparisons with other countries that Rishi Sunak himself had tried to bring into the conversation to say, actually, the UK is in a worse place. Is that because of Brexit? Is Britain broken because of Brexit? And Rishi Sunak again saying interest rates are high the world over. Inflation itself isn't as high the world over. And that's the point that perhaps Stephen Flynn was trying to push the Prime Minister on in a way that Keir Starmer really didn't bother to do.
Yeah, and he's kind of made his bed. Keir, another one here. Keir was a total waste and missed a totally open goal, and Rishi didn't answer anything anyway. What an absolute shambles. Vicky takes a different view. She says, Starmer's being astute on this. It's the lawyer in him. He knows that focusing on mortgages is going to haunt Sunak in the months to come. I mean, you could be right, Vicky, but he could still have done it more effectively. That's the point. He chose one horse, really. I'd have just gone with, why didn't you turn up on Monday? I don't understand. Why didn't you turn up on Monday?
Yeah. You
haven't
promised integrity. Why didn't you turn up?
Yeah.
You promised you'd halve inflation. How's that going? You said you were stopping the boats. Why have we seen hundreds each day? And that's what he could have done. And it's very hard for the Prime Minister to rebut that, because you're jumping issue to issue and linking them with this kind of coherent theme of failure and broken promises. And it's quite difficult for a Prime Minister to rebut that, whereas he was clearly prepared for the mortgage debate. He knew that was going to come up in some capacity. His answers weren't particularly convincing, but I thought Keir Starmer could have given a far tougher ride and opted for some reason not to do so. That takes us right, James, in a sense that mortgages are going to become, they already are.
And he has to make them stick. So what was the phrase? The Tory mortgage penalty.
Yes.
Is that what he's called it?
Yes.
He needs that to stick, doesn't
yes,
he? He needs everyone who gets a nightmare through their letterbox to think, blah, 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 I mean, Tories.
But when you look at polling, he's pushing an open door here, because when you look at the polling and people ask, who do you blame for the fact that your mortgage payments go up? A lot of people already say the government. So, yes, he does need to make sure that politically for him that continues to be the case. But in many cases, it already is. So he can afford to sort of take a few risks elsewhere. Then there's the fact, of course, James, that, yes, while I think it's 2.1 million people are expected to have mortgage increases between now and the next general election, that's still a lot of people who are on fixed terms, who have paid off their mortgage, who are renters, who haven't been able to get on the housing ladder. So while mortgages is absolutely key, I think there will also be pressure on Keir Starmer to sort of focus more broadly on the wider cost of living, which he's done in recent weeks. But on the day that inflation failed to fall at all, on the day that suggested the Prime Minister is quite possibly now going to miss the target that experts thought was the most easy one for him to meet of halving inflation. Experts thought
that's a terrible thing to have done. To get it in the neck for making a promise that was impossible to miss, and then to miss it.
Yes.
So that bit's not his fault, but it was the bit that it's going to be missed isn't necessarily his fault. The sense of gravity bringing inflation down. It's just appallingly bad luck, but he's done it. He's pledged it. Should we run through them? Do you want to just do one by one? So what was it when he made the promise? It was at 10.7.
It was just under 11%.
And it's now 8.7. And he needs it to be down to 5.3
by the end of the year,
or 5.4 by the end of the year.
So he's not on track at all. It would take an economic miracle, frankly, to get it from 8.7 to where it needs to be by the end of the year. And the problem is, James, he's pledged something that's not really in his control.
Well, that was the mad thing about it, because he thought it doesn't matter that it's not in my control, because it's going to come down anyway, and I'll do a lap of honour.
Exactly.
Growing the economy.
It's happening.
Very vague.
Just about.
Exactly.
0.1%.
So he's not going to jump up and down about 0.1%, but he could claim we have grown the economy. And be unlikely to go in the other way. The national debt. Falling.
It's falling a bit, but of course there's pressure on the government to spend a lot more to help people with their mortgages. And actually the cost of borrowing, this is the big issue for the government, is as pressure grows on them to do something to help people with mortgages, the cost of them doing that increases significantly. Gilt's above 5% now, James. The core inflation, the highest level in 31 years. So actually the wriggle room the government has to spend anything more is severely restricted, and they already end up paying billions and billions of pounds a year more on the debt that already exists because of the higher rate of borrowing. So debt that has been falling a bit could well increase quite significantly in the months to come.
And it's up to 100% of GDP now. That was something that the ONS put out this morning. Everyone was obsessing about the inflation figures, but this is the highest level of government debt in more than 60 years, and it is 100% of GDP. So, I would say that is a far from open and shut case on the national debt falling pledge. So probably no on the inflation, barely on the growing the economy. 52.48. That's a very felicitous figure. So on the national debt falling, NHS waiting list.
No, not coming down. Barely coming down at all. Still around 7.2 million.
And stunt the boat.
That hasn't happened at all, despite Rishi Sunak giving a speech last week.
He's already done a lap of honour.
He had. Since then, I think it's been about an average of between 300 and 400 a day over the start of this week. So significant numbers coming over, and no sign at all of a longer-term reduction in the number of people coming here on small boats across the channel. So why Keir Starmer didn't do that, James, I just don't know.
Well, he could do it any time, I guess. Maybe wait till we're a little bit closer to Judgment Day on those 5 pledges. I have noticed, oddly, on the boat stuff, that the client media has taken its foot off the gas on that, which makes life a lot easier for Rishi Sunak and makes Suella Braverman's purpose even harder to discern than it usually is. But so the Telegraph in particular seems to be obsessed about children who pretend that they're cats or something. So the culture war element of the small boat seems to have moved, which may be...
It has a bit. The salience has slightly dropped, but it's still one of his 5 promises. It's still something that voters will remember that he put a lot of focus on. Do you remember he said after inflation, it's my biggest priority. It's the thing that I'm spending most time on. People won't forget that. And people will, the worry I think that Tory MPs, particularly in Red Wall, have is that people will feel a real sense of betrayal, particularly on that if they were promised something so clear and so tangible and it so clearly doesn't happen and isn't delivered. It's a big, big risk for the Prime Minister.
Which could be changed by the media not throwing red meat to those people, and therefore, as the figures show us, their concern diminishes accordingly. Yeah. It's a fascinating time. So missed opportunities this week is the headline.
It was just a poor display all round. I think Rishi Sunak didn't come out particularly well. Keir Starmer didn't come out of it very well. Stephen Flynn once again gets man of the match, I think.
Well, the first question was slapped down fairly effectively, wasn't it? I think Flynn's first question. I've forgotten now what it was, but I just remember thinking at the time, we didn't see that coming. I can't.
About Britain being broken.
Maybe, yeah. I can't remember.